Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the comic shop. It's BZ Comics, and the time is finally here where I'm going to be introducing my series into electronics. Now do keep in mind, with electronics, with technology, everything is updating by the day, by the second, but this is going to be a very beginner friendly guide on understanding what this thing is. So typically, as you can see behind me, I've been focusing more on aesthetics and how to print a helmet and how to aesthetically make it look like something, some kind of reference that you're going off of. Now I'm going to be showing you how to add electronics like LEDs and lights, press button switches, on and off switches, buttons, audio, and more. Enough talking, let's get to it. So what is this chip and what does it do? Now if you were anything like me growing up as a kid, you probably got into a lot of mischief, opened up some things that you weren't supposed to, and found little chips like this inside. These are what's called PCB boards, printable circuit boards. So to make that simple for you, basically what this is just like a 3D printed file and a board. On this board, there are different circuits. So you get the printable part. On this board are different circuits. Those circuits are basically like the red and black wires that you see on most of your electronics, but they're printed onto this board and they have certain functions that go along with it. Board. So printable circuit board, that's what this basically is. Now on these boards, there are different microcontrollers that come on those. It's that little small black thing there. Think of that as like the brains of the chip. Basically, that's what you're looking for when you're buying one of these boards. There are different microcontrollers that control different things. So there are controllers that focus mainly on analog controls, which we'll get into later. There are some that focus on Wi-Fi. There's some that focus on Bluetooth. Depending on what you're looking for is what you're going to look for in this chip. Now, along with the microcontroller, you see these little pins here at the top and here at the bottom. Now that's what pretty much controls the functions. So you'll program everything into the microchip, and then these small little circles are what's going to output those functions. Now they control different things like analog inputs, LCD screens, LED lights, buttons, switches, so on and so forth. Let's get more of a close-up and more of a pinout description, so that way I can show you exactly what these pins do, what these microcontrollers do, so that way you can find the right. Now there are different companies that actually sell these products, such as Arduino, which is like one of the more popular ones. You probably heard of something like that. There are Raspberry Pis. There are different vendors for these chips. One vendor that I really like for these chips is Adafruit. Not only do they give you the chips, but they give you different learn categories or learn section where you can get more into the basics. So if there's a certain electronic feature that you're trying to add, or a certain electronic feature that you're trying to learn, they have a full tutorial guide right on their website. This is not a sponsored video. This is just my honest opinion. Now, like I mentioned, there are different boards that control different things and have different features. So as you see on the website, they have a Feather M4 Express, or Feather MO Express, Adafruit ESP, Adafruit Huzzah. You're probably gonna look at a lot of these and be like, what is it? Where do I start? Which one do I pick? Well, like I mentioned, just by selecting one, they give you a full overview, full description, how to download certain setups, or how to download different softwares, where to get different libraries to put into this chip. They give you pretty much everything. Now, to identify the chip that you need, it's all in deciphering the name. Basically, in the name, just like Toyota, Camry, LE, they have a full description, so that way you can find the exact product that you're looking for. So if you look at this first one, Adafruit Feather M4 Express. Now what does that mean? Now again, Adafruit is the company, and in this case Adafruit uses Feather. So Feather is basically just describing like this is the main board. So they have feathers and they have feather wings. So basically the feather is where you'll put all the information, and the feather wing is an extension to that main board where you can connect multiple functions. Again, this will all be explained in a little. The M4 is going to be the chip, or the M4 Express is going to be the chip. Now, as you see, there's the M4, which controls certain things. There's an MO that controls certain things. This is ESP32 that controls certain things. Start off with just at least learning the company and the name. Now again, Adafruit makes this super simple to figure out. As you can see right up here in the top right, I searched in prop maker feather. Obviously I'm making props, so I'm looking for that kind of feather. and they give me a full description of all the different feather boards that actually control different props. And they actually give you some tutorials on props that they made, which with, again, a full description. Now let's say if I typed in Wi-Fi feather, again, they're gonna give me a full description of those. And from there, that's where you can click in and then again, start to understand what this board does by reading all the overview on the left-hand side. And let's say if I searched in Bluetooth, you can see the options here. So I'm pretty sure you guys get the basic point. Like I said, this is just a beginner-friendly tutorial. I'm not gonna get into each board and over confuse you guys. You guys are looking for props. That's what this is gonna be. So if you go on to Adafruit's website, this is the first board that I would highly recommend for you to like look into and understand. Go through all of these overview sections because this board is gonna give you literally everything. This board also eliminates the need for any wings. So like I said, this is the feather, the main board. Typically you would have to add a feather wing to add different sources. So to add different LEDs, to add different buttons, to add different ports. You don't have to worry about any of those wings because with this board you can put it into everything. That's why I'm mainly referencing this one. As you can see, there are a lot of pins that control a lot of different features, which I'm going to break down for you now. This board also gives you different access pins like you see over here, where you don't have to solder as much. So it's very beginner friendly, and it gives you so many different options on how to plug and port things. So you have these pins here, you have these DuPont pins here, and again, last resort is soldering. So it gives you a lot. Now I do have this board, but it's much easier to show you here on the computer. Basically, I'm gonna break down because for some of you guys reading some of this might be a little bit hard because it was for me. Just because of the language that they use, I'm just basically gonna break that language down so that way you can understand these pinouts and what they do basically. So I'm not gonna go over all of them. You can kind of go to the website or pause the video to read into the ones that you're kind of confused about. But most of these stand out to you and you're gonna like look at it and understand it. Like 3.3 volt, you already know what that is. Ground wire, you already know what that is. This section here, as you can see, these pinouts here, what they control is the battery for this port here. So there are different lithium batteries that you can actually purchase on Adafruit that connect right into here. So like I said, it eliminates a lot of the soldering. Look at your LEDs, it's a lot easier to understand this because if you look at like a power switch, it doesn't really identify those. But if you look at your LED strips, they'll either say 5 volt, DIN and ground, or they'll say RGB, and then give you like a voltage, or they'll say RGBW and give you a voltage. Basically, that's where you'll plug into these. So let's say if you look at that ground wire, this ground wire here on the board is where you put that support basically. Depending on the voltage that you have on your RGB, if it's a 3 volt, if it's a 5 volt. Again, this says 3 volt here, but through this main support here, that's where you're gonna get your 5 volt support. So that's just these basic pins right here. These are gonna be more so your power source pins. You have your USB pin here, which is where you're gonna connect to your computer. And although these are not lit up, again, like I mentioned, you have the reset and boot button. Come down a little bit further, these are going to be what's called GPIO pins here at the top. So GPIO pins, basically that means general purpose input output. So if you look at the line that says either DIN on your RGB, this is where you would connect this pin. So from the microchip, when you program the sketch into the microchip, the function that controls the outputs to the lights will go to these pins here. Now there are different functions that those pins kind of have as additions to them. There are some that are just basic, and there are some that come with like pulse with motion, so PWM. Again, they put crazy words and acronyms. It's basically a different language that you have to learn with this. So PWM is more so, if you think of the Knight Rider animation, if you ever seen that movie, it's kind of like an old school movie, but you'll notice that there's a light on the car, and that light bounces backwards and forwards. Or if you ever watched any doctor movie and you've seen that like line where it's monitoring somebody's heart, that's pulse with motion basically. So there will be a squiggly line to typically indicate that, but on this board specifically, that's why I'm recommending it. It already comes on most of these. Again, if you scroll a little further down, it'll break it down for you. Like I said, if you look at this, I can understand it. It'll be very intimidating. That's why I'm breaking it down for you. But this is just like the breakdown of what each pin does, so that way you can use it as reference. So those are going to be these pins here. Alongside with pulse width motion, you have basic input, like I said. So that means that the light will basically either go on and off. It's either true or false. Basically in binary code, so the zeros and ones, it's either 0 or 1. It's either on or off. So you have PWM, pulse width motion, where you can do different features, make the lights do different things. And then you have the basic, which just, it's either on or it's off. Now with that on and off, you can obviously still change the colors. A little bit lower, you'll see AO, A1, and A2. So basically, along with having lights, you can also have analog. Now, analog is just like a fancy word for control. So if you think of your PlayStation or Xbox control, that's analog. Back in the day, if you ever touched the thermostat and you found out why you shouldn't touch the thermostat, that's an analog. But nowadays, they just have like a digital analog where you just press the button and the temperature either goes up or down. So that's a function of analog. So if you're making a print where you're gonna want one of those, you can think of like either like a turning kind of wheel. Those will be connected into this port. So you can go over that, but that's basically what analog means. So just a quick review, just in case any of that confused you. Again, we have our voltage pins here, our ground pins here, and to supply power to this battery here, we have those pins there. Along with that, we have our input output pins. So depending on what RGB LED that we're using, depending on what light switch, depending on what button we're going to be connecting, those are all going to go to these switches here. We have our analogs here, which again, analog is just like the dial on your radio, the dial for your thermostat. That's what these A's here focus on. Now don't be afraid if your LED says 3 volt, this does come with a 5 volt source as well. This 5 volt source is just going to be in these pinouts here. So this is just like a screw. Basically your red and black wires will go in here and then you can screw these down. Again, that just eliminates the need for soldering. Again, making it that much easier for you. Now these other pins that you see here, this MI, MO, RX, TX, SCL, SDA, I'm not going to get into those because more than likely you're not going to be using those. Some of these MI and RX, if you're going to be putting a screen, so like a little LCD screen on a print, that's where you'll be focusing on those. Again, that's getting a little bit too deep into things. Basically, again, all you want to know is this is where any of your functions like lights, on and off switches go up here, and then this is where the ground goes from there. So again, just a quick bullet summary of everything that we went over. We have a PCB board, the printable circuit board. We know what the circuits are. We know that it's printable, that it's printed, and that it's printed on a board. We know on that board we have this black chip here, which is the microcontroller. That controller controls different features, such as basic inputs, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi. And to find the exact board that we need, in this case, we're looking at first the name, which is Adafruit. Then we have the feather, which again indicates that it's the main board. We have the M4 microcontroller chip, or the M4 Express microcontroller chip. On that chip, we have different buttons such as reset and boot. We have different pins that have different functions or different purposes, such as general purpose pins, power and ground pins, analog pins, and additional voltage pins. Right, so now we're at the point where we got the chip. We got the chip because we know exactly what chip we're looking for. We know what these pinholes do and how we're gonna at least connect everything to it. We at least have the basic understanding. Now that we know that, the question probably is, well, what software do I use to actually put the program into the chip? For that information, guys, you guys are gonna have to stay tuned for the next video. And there I'm gonna go over what different programming softwares you should actually download to actually start putting stuff in here, where you can get different libraries to start putting stuff in here, and how you can actually start getting rolling. And I'm gonna show you some other creators that you can watch to get a different reference. I know some of the things I may have said may not click to you, but if you watch somebody else say it, it might be like, oh shoot, why didn't he say it like that? And then it'll actually start rolling. But in the meantime, do your homework, because how do you want to program something and you don't even know what a PWM is yet? What's a PWM? What's a GPIO? Get that stuff down first, because you'll be pulling your hair until you understand that. What's bootloader mode? Find that out, because I'm gonna tell you, once you find that out and understand that, it's gonna save you a lot of headaches. I was literally scratching my head and pulling my hair. As you can see, it's going away. Trying to figure out what bootloader mode was. So do your homework, wait for part 2, come back to part 2, we'll get into a little bit more. Besides that, it's PC Comics. Peace. What's the PWM? You don't know what a GPIO is. You don't know.